Okay, we're on air right now. How you doing, David?
I'm doing well. Good morning to you.
Good morning. Good morning. So the topic of the day is what you can do right now. 15 positive action steps you can complete today to help you win your case, or at least stack the odds in your favor.
Right.
So, for everyone that would potentially be accused of a DUI would want to do whatever they can do to make a positive difference. So you
Right.
gave me a list of 15 things. And so I want to go through them step by step and ask you some questions about each one.
Okay. And,
This is
and
a
remember to
really
be.
good.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So
Right.
that you gave me is write down everything you can remember. Uh, now, there's several different aspects of that, and if you could just go through, every category of things that people should write down, that would be great, David.
Sure. Okay. First of all, and this is what I want people to do when they wake up. Then after the first day, you've been charged. The next day, this isn't while you're there on the side of the road, but I mean after you get out and after you get back in your own home and get a second. There's some things I want you to do positively to start helping me help you. All right. And there's a list of things. Okay. So number one, as you said, is write down everything you remember. And this is important because it's an exhausting process and it's an intense one that people go through with law enforcement when they're charged with DUI. But you believe it or not, you are going to forget some of these things, and so I want you to write these things down so that later on you'll have that and we'll be able to access that and remember that. Number one is I want you to write down how much sleep did you have the night before? How tired were you? Did you get a good night's sleep the night before? Did you wake up extra early? Did you not have much sleep? Try and keep track of that. Believe me, that's something you'll forget. What did you have to eat and when? Specifically as possible. This is very important. It's going to affect the absorption of alcohol into your system. It's going to be really relevant in the case, and you're going to forget this. So you want to write down what you had to drink and when you had it and how much you had and over what period of time. Right. Thirdly, what I want you to write down are what drinks did you have, alcoholic beverages and water as well. So not just and people you're going to forget the water for sure. So trying as best you can write down and just think back over the day before and remember when exactly and what exactly did you do as that went along. Okay. Some of the things I want you to write down immediately are what was the weather like? Was it cold or was it rainy? Because maybe that had some effect on roadsides or on you when you were being transported or something to that effect. So I need to know that as well. What clothes were you wearing? That's something you're very likely to forget. What specifically? What kind of shoes did you have on? That's a big thing. Flip-flops versus cowboy boots versus heels. Jewelry, things of that nature that might affect your balance. Anything like that. I want you to write down everything that interacted between you and the officer, what you remember telling him and him telling you, and how you felt about that as well. When the officer asked you to do roadsides, did you feel compelled? Did you feel like you had to? When he asked you to step out of the car, did you feel like there was any choice? What was his demeanor like? And what was your demeanor like? And what did you say? And what did he say? Something else I want you to write down is what other witnesses we might be able to rely on. Now, first of all, each individual person might have witnesses they're not aware of. For example, who were you with the night before or the previous day? Who was there with you? You want to write that down, and I think it's worthwhile to contact them and just and explain what happened to you if you can, and get their input as well, so that they can recall. Otherwise, they might forget. And so write down whatever witnesses you had, friends, not just in the vehicle, but who you're with earlier, who may have seen you, who may be able to come and testify about your sobriety. That would be very important. And in addition, oftentimes there's certainly going to be more than one officer. Sometimes 3 officers, sometimes 4 officers. So I want you to write down how many there were. Were they in marked patrol cars or not? Were they in uniform or not? Sometimes these they'll have ride-along people who are just observing. Those people can be great witnesses. And they may not agree with everything the officer saw. So we need to know if that's possible. And if so, then I can fight to find, because the government won't mention these. The prosecution won't tell us who they are unless we say, well, there was someone else in the front seat of the car, they were wearing plain clothes, here's the clothes they were wearing, this person's a witness to the case, and you have to identify them to me. It can really help a case. So that's a big one. If you took a breath test, I want to know about what kind of conversation did you have prior to taking the breath test? What was the advisement that was given to you? Where was it? Was it told you that it was voluntary? How was it read to you from a card, or did he speak to you and just talk to you face to face? Those sorts of things on. Was someone with you the entire time? There's supposed to be a 20-minute observation period. Was that actually conducted? Were they observing you, or were they doing their paperwork during that time, or what happened for that? Other questions I might ask somebody, if you took a breath test, was there anything else in your mouth, like orthodontic equipment, or dentures, or tobacco, or gum, or those are supposed to be things that they're supposed to check for, and certainly we need to know if those things happened. All right, also need to write down what medications you were on. Those can greatly affect blood alcohol and coordination and balance and things of that nature. Medical conditions is very important. Not just physical, but those are very important. A lot of people have, especially guys who work for a living, they're going to have dinged up body, bad knees, bad hip. We need to know that sort of thing. Sports injuries from the past, things of that nature. Also, mental conditions that you might have, post-traumatic stress disorder, anxiety, things of that nature that could affect you. A thing like a breathing or lung condition like asthma or emphysema or anything like that, we need to know that as well. So those are things that I think people should write down right away and hand them to their lawyer. So that would be number one.
Fantastic. That was a very exhaustive list, and I'm sure it'll be incredibly useful for people to go through that and get their house in order.
I hope so.
Right up to the kind of needs. So the next thing on your list that you gave me is in regards to saving your receipts from the evening. Maybe you could talk a little bit about that.
Well, that's what I'm looking for is to rebuild the evening before, and I need evidence to do that. Now, it's nice to have testimony, somebody saying, here's where I went, here's what I ate, here's what I drank. Even better than that is a credit card receipt or a cash receipt. Sometimes people will stick those in their pockets. So this is evidence that we can use to help us create and build a bigger event than the prosecution is. The prosecution is going to focus on the side of the road and the test, and I want to build this out. So no, here's what really happened. Like, they don't know. So let's build out the day over a longer period of time. So here's where I went. Here's what I was thinking. Here's what went on there. Here's what I had to eat and drink. And here's the receipt from it. Boy, isn't that great to have? So those things often get lost. Preserve those if you can. That'll be number two.
You were telling me about a strategy whereby you take a piece of paper, 1 through 24, and you just staple the cash receipts to the number that corresponds with the day, so you can kind of rebuild the day and try to figure out exactly where you were at every hour of every day. Is that what? Right.
It's a memory guide for the person who's been charged. That's one thing. It's also evidence that we can use. We can present and say, well, that's a very common question prosecutors ask. Well, did you have the receipts from that night? And how great is it to pull it out of your pocket and say, well, I actually happen to have it right here. I've done that many times, and it's a great thing to have to plant they're going to ask that question, and my client's ready to answer it with evidence, and it just stops short that entire, you're a liar. No, you're not. Here's proof. What more do you want? It makes the prosecutor look like a jerk and the person look much more honest. So definitely a very important thing to have.
Everyone can always contact their credit card company if they can't, if they don't have their receipt as well. So.
Well, you can, and we try and rebuild it that way. That's another thing we can do. But even better is the actual receipt, and and sometimes that'll even give me the name of a waitress. And boy, isn't that nice to have? I can call the waitress, because the waitress certainly isn't going to testify that she served people who are physically or obviously impaired, because that would be against the law. We'll let them drive away. They're going to come in and say, no, they're actually trained to look at patrons and decide whether they're intoxicated. And they'll say, no, I served him alcohol and he seemed perfectly fine to me. What a great! It'll help me like you can't believe. So the actual receipt itself is better than just the credit card from before. Believe it or not.
Good for clearing that up. Okay, great. So step number 3 is save all of your photos from the evening.
Right. Okay. And it's probably easier for people to save their own photos. But what about other people's photos who are with them as well? And sure, they may post things on Facebook, but you might talk about people, say, hey, can I get pictures of us? And you can see that obviously some of them maybe we don't want, but other ones, and the prosecution won't know which ones we don't want them to know. But I want to see all of them just so I can help build it, and to see people calm and composed at a dinner versus jumping up and down in a bar. We may not provide those photographs, but certainly let's look at them and see what we have, so we can rebuild the evening. And who knows whom we may see? I may see you with a picture of somebody else, and you may, oh, I forgot I was with that person. I go, oh, we got another witness. Let's bring them in to try our case, to expand the moment that the prosecution's relying on to a much bigger time, and saying, well, there's no evidence about this. The evidence for earlier in the evening is here's a picture of it. It paints 1,000 words. Let's
Right.
get that instead. And you may lose your own photos.
Specifically, especially in regards to social media. And let's say, for example, I'm arrested for DUI, and I did have a little bit to drink, and my friends posted all of the photos from the entire evening on their social media accounts. Should I go ahead and tell them to take those photos down, at least temporarily, or should I leave them be? Especially, what if I'm worried if it might incriminate or it might portray me in a negative light? Is there any harm to asking my friends to take those photos down?
Well, you should be worried about that, because certainly as a lawyer in a case, I want to control the information. I want to be able to. I mean, maybe it's helpful, maybe it's not helpful, but I don't want to guess at that. Nothing you'd hate more, and it's happened in cases I've tried where smart prosecutors pulled up a Facebook page and shown a photograph, and it can ruin you. I want to know what's out there, and certainly I don't want anything released that didn't come through my desk. So that is the very first thing you should do is talk to your friends.
So one is get your friends to send you the photos, but don't put them up on social media, and if they're up, then take them down?
Absolutely.
Okay, got it. Okay, so I think everyone's clear on that. So the next one is ask friends and family to save your voicemails. Maybe you can talk about that.
Right. This is something that's pretty common. You have called people afterward. They might have released you right away to a sober individual, and you called somebody. Well, that voicemail, think about it. The officer is going to be testifying your voice was slurred, but he didn't record your voice. I can actually play your own voice back from a voicemail on your mom's or on your husband's or boyfriend's or wife's cell phone, and play the message you played and listen to your voice. And it's like, well, does this sound like a person who's intoxicated? Are they slurring their words? This is an hour after their arrest. Boy, wouldn't that be great? Those are messages that are usually lost very quickly. So it's a great piece of evidence if it exists to bring out. And no matter what, if you have something like that, you have to save it, and you're going to have to. And it's not going to be on your own. It's not going to be on your own phone. It's going to be on someone else's phone. So we're going to have to go to someone else and get them to preserve it for us and get a copy of it. So it's something certainly you ought to do, and I highly recommend it.
Okay, great. And the next one that we have here is contact your witnesses, but carefully.
Right.
So maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
All right. So I say carefully because you don't necessarily want to be going back to the bar, to the scene of the crime, so to speak, or the waitress, or wherever you were at a party, and talking to those people necessarily. First of all, they may, who knows what they're going to say. We may not, and they may suddenly be able to identify you where they couldn't before. I mean, I think that's a dangerous situation to have a client conducting investigation like that. I don't really want that. What I do want, though, is there are going to be friends and family who are aware of this, who were around, and I need to know who they are. I need to know where you were and who you talked to. I'd ask for a physical description of like, say, a waitress, for example. Give me a physical description. What time were you there? I can find out what her shift was. We can find out what she has to say without the client putting themselves in front of a percipient witness who's going to later testify in court. That could be dangerous. You don't know what they're going to say. So I prefer that the lawyer conduct that and control that information. Your own friends and family, of course, I'm going to need that, and I'm going to need, and I think for them, if you can trust them and they're helpful to you, and they agree with you, then certainly you can talk to them. And from each person that you talk to, I'm going to need a name, an address, and a phone number so that I can call them back. And I need an address ultimately. Just the basic details of what they saw, because also they're going to forget, and they're not going to remember that was the night you'll never forget. They may not necessarily remember that you were with them that night. So important to talk to those people as soon as you can. So that would be my answer to that question.
Okay. Right. Fantastic, fantastic. So people should be cautious, but contact their friends and family and
Yes.
the people that are on their side. Okay, so the next one is in regards to photos. Maybe you can talk about photos of the scene.
Okay. Right, and certainly there's some things. For example, if there was an accident, I want photos of the car or cars involved. You probably get those from your insurance. You may have them yourself. So I want that. I also any photographs you had from that night that you were taken, but also afterward, if you can get there quickly the next day and take a shot. If there was something important there, like a tire mark, if it were in the snow and there could be tracks left, if there was construction, because that construction might not be there by the time you get to me and we can get out there. That construction might be gone. So there may be some things you can get that'll help me remember what the scene was like. Now, also, it's helpful to me, and I would actually not like someone to go back if there was a bar or a restaurant. I don't want them, or a party. I don't want them back at that place for the reasons we spoke of. But the side of the road, yeah, you can go and take pictures of that. That'll be very helpful. One good thing about modern technology is through Google Maps. I sit in my office with my clients, and it's kind of creepy, but I can take them right to the scene where we were at and look at it from different vantage points, the satellite, street view, and have them show me where they were driving. And it's really great for them to be there with me. If I'm going to do a trial, I invariably go there myself and look at the side of the road and look at the situation, just so I can understand as well as possible what the physical scene was like. So it's important. And a photograph can be really helpful.
Fantastic, fantastic. Okay, and the next one is in regards to documenting specific medical ailments and physical injuries.
Right. So this is a good one because obviously those can affect your balance, and you're going to be trying to do roadsides with, say, a sprained ankle. Well, we need to know that. I've had people who, after they were charged, went to the doctor about a sprained ankle and had it looked at, got an X-ray, had a doctor diagnose it was swollen and it was sprained. Very helpful to us in a case. So even afterward, I need that. But certainly the person needs to document anything they have that can affect it. Then, in addition to that, invariably I find that when people are handcuffed, it leaves a pretty wicked mark on their hands. If that's your case, and I'd say 90% of the cases that's the case, I want a photograph of that. I want the people to see that the officer put a mark on you that lasted for 3 days. That's a big deal. I think people should see that sort of thing. Any other documentation you can get, a doctor's note or anything, those things will really be solid in court. And if a prescription for a painkiller for an injury that you sustained during or before the arrest, very helpful. So those are good things to get.
Great, great. That's very helpful. Okay, the next step is don't talk about your case with anyone but a lawyer. Maybe you can talk about that.
Yes, this is important. Okay, there's a couple ways it can arise. I've had people call up an officer and apologize to him, which is a great thing for a citizen to do, but it was really damaging in that particular case. It was deemed a confession. I would say that and sometimes people have to appear immediately afterward in court, and there's clerks, and there's a prosecutor, and there's police officers standing around, and there's a judge. I really don't want statements being made about the case because, as I said before, I want to be the one who can control the information as well as possible. This also goes to what I mentioned earlier about going back to the scene and talking to a waitress, and all we need them to do is to be called as a witness and say, well, he came in the next day and he asked me if he remembered how drunk he was. That would not be helpful to us. So I guess the statement is anything you say can be used against you. It's actually true. It's going to be used against you. So just you want to talk to your lawyer and run everything through him first is my advice.
Got it. Got it. And the next one we have here is make solid plans for dealing with your employer.
Right. Right. Because what's going to happen? I mean, the most important thing for people, many of them, it's their family, and it's their work, and certainly this is going to impact. It could impact that. Now, I'm not suggesting that you have to go to your employer and disclose the fact that you were charged with DUI, but you might want to check the policies and procedures at your workplace for that kind of thing. Is there any? What about your licensing requirements and stuff for your work? Is that going to affect it? Do you have to drive for work? Do you have a CDL? Obviously, those are a commercial driver's license. Those are things we really got to know. Some people have a relationship with an employer that it's solid enough that they can disclose these kind of things, and they're comfortable doing it. And if so, I think it's always better to do it that way, simply because we can need to make plans for the future. You may be without a license; it may affect you. It's better to know the information outside. Now, if you feel like the disclosure to the employer itself is something you just can't do because it will be used against you, and maybe it's better to keep them in the dark about this. Okay, then maybe we can get some information on the policies at the workplace, something of that nature. What kind of vacation time do they have? Maybe we need to think about using some of that. Those sorts of things. But I would suggest that before you actually disclose this sort of thing to an employer, you might want to talk to your lawyer first, just because it may not be necessary in some circumstances to tell them at all. And if that's the case, then maybe better they don't know.
That's very good to know. The next one is kind of similar. Make good plans for dealing with your school or university.
Right.
So,
and well, if you're a college student, a lot of colleges have an honor roll or honor policy where any kind of criminal charge can be used to expel or suspend a student. So you need to understand what those policies are. Again, I wouldn't recommend disclosing it unilaterally on your part, but you want to know is there such a code? Does that require it? Especially if there's an arrest on campus. Those invariably result in administrative action being taken against my clients. If it's off campus, it still could affect it, and you're going to be needing to go to some alcohol classes almost certainly, or there may be some probationary requirements. You might want to make sure those fit into your schedule. So that's something to think about too. Of course, also if there's travel involving school, studying abroad or anything of that nature, we need to know that as well. Or anything, especially you might be driving for school or in school, we need to know that too.
Great. Okay, that's good to know. The next one I think is really important these days, which is adjust the privacy settings of your specifically your social media.
Yeah, sorry about that. Right. In regards to that, you don't have to be a rocket scientist to see that that's important. In this day and age, a picture can last forever. You don't need a prosecutor getting an idea of your normal lifestyle or what's going on in your personal life. I think it's a bad idea to let those people have access to that anyway. But I'm not advising them about their general life. I'm just talking about this one particular case, the DUI, and in that case, yeah. Everyone has a Facebook account, make it friends only, and Twitter obviously. You see, especially with younger people, they document much of their lives, and they only put the fun parts, And so if that's the case, then I certainly want to control that information, and having a prosecutor browse through your Twitter account or your Facebook account, not a fun thing for anyone to have.
Exactly. Very, very important. So the next one I think you've talked about earlier, which is get an independent drug test. Talk more about that.
Well, okay, so this is important because it takes time for drugs to metabolize, and I want to see what you are the next day. Now, many people have heard that marijuana, for example, can stay in the system for months and months and months. The next day, upon release, if you get another drug test, and I can show, well, it's still the same. 12 hours later, they released him as a sober individual, and here's a test showing the same results as their test. What about that? Those sorts of things can be important. As I say, an independent drug test also, it could have dramatically different results. And the thing about this is that they don't know about it unless it helps us. It could be a very powerful thing for somebody to go and do on their own. if someone else is going to be accusing them of driving under the influence, and you were so convinced you didn't do it that you went and got your own test, and here's the results. That would be very powerful in a trial, and I think it's always worthwhile to consider doing.
Yeah, and I think you said something about getting them to conduct an observed drug test, so you
Right.
can have custody or something.
Well, yeah, because obviously anyone can bring a jar of urine in and have it tested, but that's really not what you need. You need the kind of test we're talking about. It has to have forensic quality in court, which means that you need to know it came out of your body physically. So there are, believe it or not, there are people who provide those tests, and at any place who's doing actual education and alcohol classes, they also almost certainly will do testing as well, and they will observe. That happening. So just so that we can establish a clean chain of custody, so we know this is actually the drug test from your own body.
Exactly, very important. And number 13 here is schedule the DMV formal review hearing.
Okay, so I will tell you exactly what that is. Okay, so if you took a test, a breath test, or if you refuse to take a test, either and in the breath test circumstance you're over 0.08, or if you refuse, no matter what your VAC would have been, they're going to serve you with a notice of revocation. That notice of revocation tells you that the Department of Revenue has already taken your license. It's happened. But you can challenge that and get a hearing on that. And there's a timeline on that. It's 7 days from the date of your notice that you must respond. And what I like people to do is actually go personally to the DMV and say you want what's called an express consent hearing. That is the suspension that you're immediately facing. It's called an express consent suspension. And this is what we want a hearing on that. If you request a hearing on that, you will be able to drive up until the date of the hearing. They're usually setting those hearings about 50 days from the date of your request, so like a month and a half, a little bit more than a month and a half often. They must give it to you within 2 months. You must get the hearing. But you can drive up until the date of the hearing. But if you don't make the request in the 7 days, if you put it out and don't think about this for a couple weeks, then we've missed your deadline to do that, and I can't help you on that. Now, if you took a blood test, what will happen with that is if the results come back over 0.08, the Department of Motor Vehicle will send you notice of a suspension through the mail saying, we have noticed that you had a VAC over 0.08, and you must, and we need you to, you're already suspended. And again, you have 7 days to act. So it's very important that you do that. If we miss that deadline, there's nothing I can do about it. I can't get a hearing later, and I will no longer be able to fight the license part of that, which is an extremely important part. Some people might feel the most important part of a DUI. So you have to preserve your rights. You have to take a proactive step, and that is at the DMV requesting an express consent hearing.
Got it. Okay, great. And the next step is schedule to meet with your DUI attorney. Right.
As I said, people sometimes want to put things off, and they're looking at a lot of things. But there's some deadlines that are pending, and most people aren't going to have the access to this list I've given people, and they're not going to be ready to do that. And so I think talk to a lawyer right away. Every case might be different, and there may be witnesses that I need to talk to, or a scene that I need to check out. I think people need to get a lawyer as soon as possible. One thing I know about a DUI charge is the person with it is going to be feeling miserable. They're going to be scared, and they're going to not know what's going to happen. And I think a lawyer can help you understand the system, understand what you're facing, understand what can and can't happen, and that knowledge oftentimes eases that concern as well. So I think just for their own benefit, they should talk to lawyers. It's going to make them feel better. And most lawyers who work in this field, and not me in particular, offer free consultations to people who are facing these charges, and I think it's worth doing. I'll answer my phone, and we can talk just over the phone if necessary. Face to face is even better. About what we can do to make this as good a situation as we can, and I think it's very important that be done right away.
And the last one on the list is take a deep breath and relax.
Right. Now, I oftentimes tell people, and they come in and they see all of this coming down all at once. And the truth of this is a marathon. It's not a sprint. This is a longer term process. You have to be able to pace yourself with what we're going to be facing. It's not going to happen all at once. It's not going to happen just today. There's going to be a little time, and in that time, maybe we can make the case better. Maybe we can come up with some stuff that helps you. Maybe we can narrow down the fields of concern such that they're not a concern anymore. But if you just relax and realize this is going to take some time, people feel pretty low after getting charged with this. There's a study done once that if you accuse someone of a crime, even if they didn't do it, they're going to start feeling guilty afterward. If the person, if they have a tough case and there's so much evidence against them that there's no way they can get out of it, and they know that. Well, even that, I can explain to them. Well, here's what you're looking at in court. Here's what we got to be concerned about, and maybe here's some situations where it's not so bad. So, and maybe we can even get you out of it all the way. Who knows? I think it's worthwhile to just relax, and it's an incredibly intense experience to be arrested by a police officer. Most people, as I said, it's the only time they'll ever come into that close contact with the police officer, and it's going to be scary. It's going to be frightening, and no one I know has ever taken that situation and said, "Oh, it's no big deal." It is a big deal what happened, and you need to just take time to recover from it. And so I tell people to relax a little bit. It's not going to happen now. This doesn't necessarily mean you're a bad person. It doesn't necessarily mean you're going to jail. Knowledge can be power in this circumstance, and you can understand this circumstance and get your head around it and understand the good things about it and the bad things about it. And I think it could take a little time to do that. So I think, as I say, it's a marathon. This procedure will go on for quite some time. It's going to take months to resolve, and you can't just live every day waiting for that moment, out of breath and feeling anxiety from this. So I think it's going to deal with that right up front. That's my advice.
Thank you very much, David. I appreciate all this. I'm sure this would be some of the most valuable advice people will receive in their life when they're faced with this. So,
I hope so.
Yeah, that's great. This is just priceless. So. On that note, we'll be signing off. We'll be talking to you soon. Have a great day.
Take care.